Good evening, everybody. Glad you can make it. This is Bob Mader with NAFI. So we've got a few folks on. And if you're watching your screen, tonight's topic is Aviation English with our guest, Michelle Haworth. She's Director of Aviation Programs at Aviation English, or Expedite Aviation English. I'm sorry, Michelle.
That's okay.
And Michelle, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please do.
Sure. Thank you so much to both of you for having me on this evening. I certainly appreciate the dedication that we all have to the students in trying to help them improve and understanding and being able to commiserate a bit with the aviation English students. I've been an instructor for over 20 years in ESL and within the past few years for Aviation English, and I've developed a curriculum to help the students achieve ICAO level 4, and the exciting thing about this is that they're achieving at twice the rate. So we're really proud of the accomplishments of the program, but really the program means nothing without the students behind it. So I work with some fantastic people all the way around.
Well, that's great.
Thank you.
So, if everybody who's not speaking could mute their speakers, otherwise we get some reverb, and it's a little odd, and I don't want to have to mute everybody. So, so people have a chance to chime in. That would be greatly appreciated. So, Michelle, are you ready for me to send the screen your way?
I sure am.
And you have the controls.
Okay, thank you. So, can you see me loud and clear?
Yeah, yes we can.
All right, fantastic. Well, as you said, I am with Expedite Aviation English, and I am the director of the programs that we have here at Expedite. And I'm super excited to be presenting this Working with International Students with you. As I said, we are all very dedicated to supporting our teams and helping them in the best ways that we can possible. So on the screen here, you see the mission of Expedite Aviation English. We really want to focus on staying relevant with our curriculum. We want it to be experiential in all that we do, and we want to assist the students in achieving their goals as fast as we can. Specifically, we recognize in working with flight students that they typically, when they arrive here, they really don't know that they need me when they come over. So it becomes a surprise to them when they find out that they don't understand air traffic control, and it can become a very nerve-wracking experience. So we want to assist them in the best ways that we can possible. I like to do a little visual when I start out a class, and if it's a virtual class, I will just relate the story over the headset with the students. But if I'm teaching a live class or a seminar, I will take the two textbooks that I wrote and say, these are two fantastic books that will help the students to prepare in your aviation English to earn ICAO level 4. And then I will drop the books down on the ground, and they say they mean essentially nothing to you if you can't communicate with somebody. And so the focus on all of our programs is so that we can communicate with one another. Our classes are a little bit different than your typical virtual classroom. If you've ever heard of classes on the internet before, some of them just involve a lot of distance learning where people randomly do exercises, maybe yes, maybe no at home. But they really don't spend any time, and what our classes do is allow those students to be face-to-face with the instructor. So if we think about the mission of Expedite, how does that support you all? Well, you all are going to save some time on the ground and in the air. because you're not going to get those blank stares from the other side of the cockpit. You're not going to have those experiences where you wonder perhaps what it is that they're doing or what they're going to do, and if they actually understood what you said. We want to help the students save some money. We've found that with ICAO level 4 or higher as proficiency for these international students, in some cases they can save upwards of $30,000 on their flight training because they're not overflying as much. So, and of course if we're saving them from overflying, we're also saving them some time. And the goal of all of this is to keep everybody safe, right? So this is our website, Expedite Level 4. You see that we offer a few things. You'll see in the 3 columns we offer classes, conferences, and curriculum. So we offer, as I said, virtual classes where the students can participate. They participate in small classes. You'll see on the left that they are classes of 1 to 8 students each. I don't like large classes for these students because they can't communicate with one another if there are too many people in the classroom. We also do conferences. We can go to flight schools. We can go to conference centers. We go to different countries, and we present essentially what the Americans might take as a test prep seminar. So if you or I, as United States citizens, as native-speaking Americans, if we were to take for example, SAT, ACT, GRE, or one of those type exams, if we wanted to go to a seminar, that would be the type of conference that we offer. And we also offer curriculum. So say you want to have your own aviation English classes in your own school. We provide textbooks that we offer, and if you need the whole program with everything from the entire curriculum to the textbooks, we can offer that to you as well. This shows you what the students experience when they go to purchase a class. They see the different buttons. You see we have many classes, more than what's listed here, and I will be going over with those with you a bit. We offer regular paced and intensive paced classes for the students. Here on this slide, you'll see a screenshot of the virtual classroom. You can see it's got a whiteboard, so you can be focused on an activity. We can present PowerPoint presentations, but in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 4 of us that are in the virtual classroom at the same time. So you can see how you can see the instructor. That will help the students with their pronunciation, understanding what's going on. And we can also turn off those cameras so we can be like we're simulating air traffic control situations. And you can see me down in the bottom right-hand corner with some of the students that I taught at an on-site class at Aviator College. So here we have a bit about the different classes that we offer at Expedite Aviation English. As I said, with the virtual classes, we have 3 main classes that we offer. Request Hire 3.0 is for ICAO Level 2 students, and we offer that in an intensive and a regular pace. We offer Expedite Level 4, which is appropriate for ICAO Level 3 students because we're visualizing a goal here. Again, as an intensive or regular pace class. Our newest class that I'm most excited about is Cleared to Communicate, which is a 1-hour class, and that is designed to work with routine situations in aviation, air traffic control, and to help the students to understand them when they're using standard phraseology and not. As I mentioned, we have the conference, we do instructor training, and I'm also an interlocutor for the T-test, which is just a fancy way of saying I get to push a CD button and play some audio recordings, and I get to communicate with the students as they're doing their ICAO testing.
So Michelle, just for clarity, for my own understanding, can you just describe the different ICAO levels?
Sure. Well, Yes, and we're going to go into some really good depth on that. The ICAO levels start at 1 and go through 6. So 6 would be considered a totally fluent speaker or a native speaker. It's very hard for non-native speakers to achieve ICAO level 6. And ICAO level 1 means you can't even say hello. So in the moment that you can say hello, you're suddenly considered ICAO level 2. The main difference in the ICAO levels, ICAO 2 kind of can speak some words, but that doesn't mean they understand much of anything. ICAO level 3, generally speaking, can understand most of what's going on if the students know what you're talking about. But with ICAO level 3, when they don't understand you, they either don't know they don't understand you, or they certainly don't want to tell you that they don't understand you. ICAO level 4, to be honest, understands about 50% of what you say in non-routine situations, but the difference with ICAO level 4 is that ICAO level 4 students will know enough to ask you a question. ICAO level 5 gets into what most people consider, a really fluent person with minimal grammar that sounds non-native, maybe with a slight accent. So that's usually what happens with ICAO level 5.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying thank you for the clarification, because I wasn't sure what it was, and I'm particularly sensitive to this topic because I'm the first person in my family born in the States, and so I think my mom was, when I was a kid, was ICAO level 2 perhaps, and Dad, being a language professor, was about a 5.5.
Right. Yes. So the 6 areas that they're judged on is pronunciation. They are judged on structure, comprehension, fluency, interactions, and vocabulary. And we'll go through this a little bit as we do the program. A little bit of background about how I created my program. I pretty much went to the source. ICAO put out a manual for implementation of the ICAO proficiency requirements, and I followed that as a guideline along with a bunch of research studies that were done on that manual to create the program that we have today. Now, the part of this that's going to be interesting to you all is the understanding that it takes 100 hours of English language study for half a level improvement. So you couldn't expect that somebody who's ICAO level 2, and I use this as an example because I taught a workshop yesterday, this same workshop to someone, and the flight instructor said to me, yes, sometimes we have students come in and I think maybe they're ICAO level 2, but then they come hang out with us for a couple weeks and then they're ICAO level 4. Well, no. you might think because you can communicate with them that they understand what's going on, but I can assure you, if you put them in the plane a little bit and let them listen to a little bit of ATC, no, that's not going to be what's going to happen. So, so let's take a look at this, and I'm going to break out of this PowerPoint a little bit and refer to this FAA memo here that was from back in January. What's interesting about this memo, this talks about aviation English and the importance of aviation English in flight schools. Flight schools are not exempt because the students are learning from having the students be ICAO level 4. ICAO level 4 needs to be where all of the students are at. And I know very well that I tread on this subject very, very carefully because we have international students and we appreciate the business of the international students. However, the FAA also recognizes that we have an obligation to make sure that everybody's safe across the board. So I step on that, as if I'm stepping on eggshells very, very gently as I approach this topic. But I bring out some interesting points that are in here And I'm going to start right here with this discussion. It's rather interesting the way this is worded. You know, it talks about how the pilot has to read, write, speak, and understand the English language. Now, reading and writing is not something that's determined on a ICAO proficiency scale. So that being said, as we move on here, it mentions that the medical examiners should not give the student pilot certificate if they have a question about the student's English proficiency. Well, you know, at the local school that I teach at with my on-site classes, the examiner does not want to be responsible for calling himself an aviation English instructor, assessing the English proficiency of those students. So, you know, it really needs to go to somebody who's qualified to determine whether or not the students are understanding what's going on. I think it puts medical examiners in an awkward position, you know, trying to ask them to assess the student proficiency scores. Do you agree?
I think it does, and I was never aware that the AMEs were put in that position by the FAA until I saw this tonight. Let me ask you this. Let's say I'm at the FBO, one of the FBOs that I teach at, and they say, here's so-and-so from such and such country. He sounds like he speaks English reasonably well. Certainly the initial discussion goes well. How can I judge, and I suspect you're leading up to this, but how can I judge where they are in their proficiency?
Yes, absolutely. I am going to lead up to this in further discussion and give you a little bit better explanation. The short answer that I would recommend, and this is going to be part of the strategies also that I give you later, I recommend you ask an either-or question or a question where the answer is going to be no.
Okay.
Because you will quickly find out, because students want to say yes. So, are you going to crash the plane today? Yes. You know, do you want to crash the plane, or do you want to fly cross country? Yes. You know, those are the types of things that you'll get, because the students won't hear the or, and they will answer you with something like that. And that's going to be your fastest way to determine that you need to pay a little bit more attention to, you know, to that particular student and what's going on. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Okay, great. Okay, so in feeling like an international student a little bit here, let's take a look at what students do for me. And if I were to have my way around the world, I would recommend that flight schools ask their students to do some type of demonstration to show ICAO proficiency. If they are level 4 or higher, they should take the appropriate test that is offered by their aviation authority. Now, there is no one ICAO test. There are multiple ICAO tests. Every aviation authority around the globe has the ability to approve or disapprove of any particular aviation test of English proficiency. So, for example, in Brazil, they use a test called the Santos Dumont assessment. At Aviator College, we use a test called the Test of English for Aviation. In Taiwan, for example, they use the TOEIC. Well, the TOEIC is like the TOEFL to test English proficiency in standard situations. Why did they use that one? I don't know. In Korea, they use a test called the EPTA, which scores a little bit lower than the T-test. But the students who are from Korea, they want to take that test because they want to be sitting in the captain's chair. They don't want to be sitting in the first officer's seat, you know? Mm-hmm. So there's many different tests that they should take. And if I were to recommend a policy for flight schools, I would recommend that they all have their students tested. And they can do it, you know, even inexpensively, informally. We use a test at Expedite that's called the BT, which is a benchmark test of aviation, and it's put out by Mayflower College, which is the same company that does the test of English for aviation. So we like to use a third-party site, so we're not saying, here, pay $30 to take this test, and, you know, or pay $200 to take this test, $300 to take this test, and then now we're going to tell you your English is bad. So okay. we use a third-party site to determine what somebody's score is before, we have them enroll in one of our classes. And we like to do an interview with them because, somebody could score really high and they could be a hard worker and they might not need to take, a lower level class. So we ask them to take a test and then we'll know what level that they're at. And then we can refer them to the test upon completion. If they take a test like the T, they can get a certificate with a stamp so that it'll be good. ICAO level 4 is good for 3 years. And they can go out and take that to their employer and be able to go get a job. ICAO testing is comprised of 3 different parts, at least the T test is. And they have some general aviation questions. Why do you want to be a pilot? Tell me about your flight training program, these type of things. The second part of their test, they listen to some 2- and 3-part messages for radio calls. And they listen to the message and they have to either repeat it back or rephrase it. They have other things where they have to ask questions and give advice. They have a picture comparison where they have to describe a picture, and then they end up doing some discussion topics about what the different pictures might be. Now, this would not be an example of a picture on a T-test. Most T-tests and ICAO tests use crash-type situations. But this student, for example, might have these 2 pictures, and they would have to compare and contrast them in 1 minute. So there cannot be a lot of pauses. In the goal at ICAO level 4, they're going to produce about 100 words of speech. So ahead of time, I have the students do a lot of practice describing pictures, setting a timer, playing the recording for themselves, and typing up a script and trying to look at the words and see what they're doing to see, is it good quality words, because the purpose of the picture practice really is, when you have an emergency situation, you do not want English to be a factor in miscommunication at all. When you're in that emergency situation, you need to get that plane on the ground, and that's that. So you have to be able to describe things, as fast as you can in as much vocabulary as you can. In the level 2 class, I do a description of adjectives, and it's in the bird strike chapter, so I try to make, a funny example, and they all understand this, and I say, there is a bird. The bird is white. The bird is flying toward us. Never mind, too late, the bird's through the windshield, So, it's like, if they're speaking at that slow pace, it's not going to get through. So they need to be able to relay the message quickly and clearly to the air traffic controller so they can get themselves down on the ground safe. So,
okay.
A lot of students and instructors think that if we throw a lot of vocabulary at the students, they're going to get better. But really what happens is they end up speaking tennis ball English. Pilot, plane, fly, air crash, blah.
Right.
And you don't really understand what the students say, really, whether they're Asian or Arabic or anywhere around the world. How well they're going to do in English, it really depends on what their grasp is of their own language. And if they understand their own language, it'll really help them to understand the second one. So I would love your listeners to understand that at ICAO level 4, they're not going to be perfect. At ICAO level 4, certain grammatical structures are not ready. They are not necessary. They don't have to get all of their grammar right. And accent reduction, so they're speaking without what you or I might call an accent, is really only necessary to just affect comprehension. We want the students to be able to think and to talk really, really well. And it's not so much about the words, but so much that they can talk and produce a message that somebody else is going to get enough information about that they can understand. So we want to listen to lots of technical things. We're going to review some grammar. We're not teaching English here. We're teaching aviation English, and there's a big difference there. With the classes that we do, the intensive classes are 17 days, and they're 4 hours a day. the students have about 2 hours of homework via our online website where they listen to videos, they do their quote-unquote book work, and they have ATC things to listen to. We do recommend that they listen to ATC, but you know, they've got so much to do as they're earning ICAO level 4. They don't have a whole lot of time to focus on the flight training as they're, you know, moving along. These are the two books that I use, Request Hire 3.0 and Expedite level 4. And you can just browse on here some of the different topics that we do within our unit. This is the class that I was telling you about that I was most excited about, that's called Cleared to Communicate. And this is where we take an ATC message and we break it apart. I had some students who they were Asian, and the air traffic controller said, "What altitude are you at?" And so because they said that, instead of saying, say, altitude, their minds were blown and, you know, miles were lost as they were in the air. So we like to break apart air traffic control messages so that they can understand, okay, is this the pilot or the air traffic controller talking? Because when you're in the cockpit, you need to know that. You need to have that situational awareness to understand who's around you. And we want them to recognize, okay, what's a better way to say that message? When you hear student pilots at your own airport, what are some better ways that they could have said that message shorter? You know, because it's not only about understanding the air traffic controller, but like I said, understanding those people that are around you. So this class, Cleared to Communicate, is probably most valuable to all of you that are listening, because this class takes the students that need to be able to get through the air traffic control messages better, faster, and puts them in a place where they feel confident. So these classes are usually taught with a combination of a flight instructor and an aviation English instructor. I like to use, so if anybody's looking for a job,
I'll be right down.
Yeah, really. Send your emails now to expeditelevel4.com. I work with ESL teachers, and I teach them how to understand the language of aviation. And I work with flight instructors to teach them how to work with their students in a ESL format, you know, how to get them to understand what's going on. So we usually have 2 instructors that teach Cleared to Communicate, and that's so that they can, when they do their ATC messages, they can focus on pronunciation, they can focus on their grammar as they're relating a non-standard message. And so it's usually like 2 days with a flight instructor and 2 days with a aviation English instructor that we do for this class. And this class is pretty inexpensive. All of our classes are about $30 an hour when you break them down. So we feel that they're pretty affordable for the amount of practice that they get. So here, Bob, as you were asking about distinguishing the levels, this is going to be probably what's going to help you out the most. So, and this is the determination that you want to have when you all are working with your flight students. If students are ICAO level 3 in any area, or for example, say, this wouldn't usually happen, but remember there are 6 language descriptors: pronunciation, structure, vocabulary, fluency, interaction, comprehension. Let's say someone is 44442. They're ICAO level 2. We don't get to average the numbers and create something wonderful.
Okay.
You need to be all the way across the board so that nothing is interfering in that comprehension. And as you'll see in this, I'm not going to waste your time by reading to you, but the focus of ICAO level 3 is that ICAO level 4 predominantly, if you are speaking in a non-routine situation, they either will not tell you that they don't understand you because they don't want to hurt their pride, or they don't recognize that they don't understand you, but you will know in a crystal clear way that they don't understand you. So at level 4, and I usually see this about halfway through my class, all of a sudden they start doing something magical. You'll see an interaction at ICAO level 4. They can self-correct. So at ICAO level 4, especially when they're newbies at ICAO level 4, they almost start correcting themselves constantly.
Okay.
You know, oh, did I say that right? Here, let me say it 75 different ways for you, so that you know that I understand you. You know, or if I say something and then I'm trying to correct them and they say, no, I don't mean that. You know.
Interestingly, I have a native-born American who does that, and as one of my students. But I think that's a different issue entirely.
That could be personality.
Yeah. So.
Who knows? I tend to talk too much, which is why I don't fly. Because if you could see my hands going right now, if I sit on my hands, I can't communicate anymore. So, so if we could listen to some ICAO samples now.
Mm-hmm.
And play that audio. We're going.
Do you want me to play it all the way through, or take a pause?
Yeah, if you play it all the way through, I will hit the button as we're moving through. So just if you all are listening, if you can just focus on some of these elements and just kind of tell me what you notice, and then Bob, you can tell me what you notice from these different levels.
Oh, I'm on the spot now. Here we go.
All right.
ICAO level 2.
When the aircraft is being iced, it won't only increase the weight but also reduce the friction between air and upper wind surface. Thus, it will make the aircraft lose altitude fast, especially it is very dangerous when just off. For example, the flight 609 killed the Manchester United soccer team in Munich. In addition, the icing can lessen the sail of the aircraft function like rudder, elevator, aileron. For example, the Flight 4184 of American Eagles in 1994.
Wow. Certainly, accent. I couldn't even. I'll be honest with you. It was so difficult for me to understand. I couldn't even tell you if the syntax was wrong. And this is an open forum. If anybody wants to chime in and make any observations, please do. But the only thing I got out of that was something about American Eagles in 1994.
Yeah, I mean, he's reading from a textbook.
Is he really?
Yeah, he is reading from a textbook. So his issue was pronunciation. That gentleman was one of the hardest workers I've ever met. He worked with me for 3 months, and he got from arriving to me and not being able to, we couldn't communicate for about 2 weeks, to getting ICAO level 4 in 3 months. Just a really hard worker, great guy, but pronunciation was a struggle for him for, I don't know, almost all the way through.
I'll be honest with you. If I thought he was an American, and this is not a pejorative, but I've worked with people, hearing impaired people, and that's almost what it sounded like to me.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. You ready for me to go to the next level?
Sure.
Okay, and I inadvertently, bear with me one moment, I inadvertently hit the wrong button, so I have to scooch the audio forward just a little bit.
ICAO level 2.
No, we're not going to do that again. Let me move it
There
up.
is a second ICAO level 2, so...
Okay, I'll take it up to about, 60 seconds in the recording?
This is my homework.
That's it.
I will speak about picture. In this picture, I see Montreal International Airport. The airport has 2 big runways, and I see there are some hangars over there. I see there are 3 big taxiways over there, and it looks like a lot of homes around the airport. And I see at the bottom of the picture big road.
ICAO level.
Okay, so it sounds like we're about to get into level 3, but it certainly sounds as if he's describing the airport well. Anybody else want to chime in? I did notice there were many words that were mispronounced. Hunger, for example. Aport, he dropped the R. Things like that.
Yeah. What you notice with that particular student is his pronunciation is certainly markedly better than the first student, but if you really listen to what he says, he doesn't say anything. You know, everything is over there.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
If you cut out all of the spaces in between what he said, you wouldn't have a lot of meat, you know,
Okay.
in the sentence. So a couple things with, so, you know, the vocabulary is lacking. Fluency interactions is a little bit lower. The structure isn't horrible. The pronunciation isn't horrible. He's describing a picture, so you're not evaluating comprehension in that task, you know, but that, you know, gives an inkling of things. So you notice things that he did, you know, like pronunciation that interfered with what he says. So, okay, let's go to level 3.
Level
And there are
3.
2.
Aviation during these 10 years made important improvement. In fact, for example, the cockpit of an aircraft changed, burned some new instruments, and now technology gives advice to the pilot. Before, in the past, the pilot was on itself and he hadn't help from nobody.
ICAO level 3.
I'm just going to let it roll through.
So November 1, we have a problem between a flight attendant and passengers. We think that the problem is for a place in the aircraft.
Okay. Certainly, in the second one, I couldn't quite tell if he was calling himself an N number or something like that. There were still some accent problems, and certainly the syntax was a little odd. Obviously, he was trying to describe sounded like an altercation in the airplane.
Right. And you're bringing up a key point there. You know, with level 3, it's not so much that they're saying things that, you know, that don't make sense or you don't understand, but sometimes you have to focus so much on their structure, you know, as you say, that with their syntax, you're having to put the words into order yourself, so that's causing a delay in comprehension on the part of the listener. So you bring up a good point there.
I spent a good part of my youth explaining to my friends exactly what my mom said. So I understand that one well.
Yep, perfect there. All right, we'll look at the next one.
ICAO level 4.
Lufthansa 432, confirm your left main gear stuck at the grass.
I confirm, shut down the engine number 1. The bogey bug now.
Roger.
Okay, so that's ICAO level
ICAO
4. What do you notice there?
One word I didn't understand, but they were able to communicate clearly that a gear is stuck in the grass. Somebody taxied off a runway, and that the engine on that side, or at least one of the engines, will shut down so that the fire department or whoever's coming out there won't get injured by the aircraft. That they have safed that part of the aircraft so somebody can inspect the gear. Right.
So do you start to notice there he's got a higher level of vocabulary than some of the other students that you've heard thus far, and his flow is a lot smoother?
It sounded as if he was communicating abstract concepts, or let me say it this way, a concrete. He was able to describe a concrete concept in an abstract way because he's painting a word picture.
Right, right, exactly. Painting a word picture. Good description there. Okay.
Okay, and level 5.
ICAO level 5.
Well, they do pass the medical check in Russia, although that's uncommon in many other countries in the world. In Russia, you have to pass the medical check where they will measure the blood pressure and also...
Where did you get a recording of my father?
That is from a Rated Speech Samples website. I don't have the pleasure of recording too many ICAO level 5 people, although because they're in a conference scenario when I get ICAO level 5. My virtual classes go up through ICAO level 4, so I don't get the joy of recording level 5 quite there.
And obviously that sounded like somebody who was nearly a native speaker. And the reason I made the joke, my father isn't Russian, he wasn't Russian, he was Hungarian, but the reason I made the joke is it sounded just like my dad, who did sound like a native speaker with a slight accent. There's no other way I can describe it.
Great. Okay.
So I don't want to make this about me. Is anybody, as I say, we've got open mics here. If anybody wants to jump in.
Yeah, tell me what you notice.
Anybody? I'm going to pick on somebody. Van's out there, I know that.
Well, you sounded, when they started off in the level 2 and 3, you sounded like you sort of understood what they were saying. I didn't have a clue. Until you got to level 4, I didn't have a clue what anybody was saying.
Okay.
So
imagine that over a radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at a non-towered airport where you're trying to figure out where everybody is.
Exactly.
I would imagine also that it depends on how tuned your ear is over time working with international students to picking up their accent and being able to decipher certain things that they're saying versus having no experience with international students.
Yeah, and again, I'm a bit more fortunate. Those of you who clicked on the commercial in eMentor today, the hyperlink to the YouTube video, that's the kind of thing I used to have to go through in my house because Mom's accent, and until I was about 8 years old, she could not speak English proficiently. And growing up in the northern suburbs of Chicago, I became self-trained in being able to understand those kinds of nuances. So Van, to your point, Van, I'm kind of lucky there.
Yeah, okay.
But for other people, it can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
So, certainly, I know when I speak German to somebody these days, they just look at me like I'm out of my mind because my German's kind of deteriorated pretty badly.
I understand.
So I'm probably ICAO level 0.
Yeah, this is Rick chiming in here.
Hey, Rick.
Hey. One of the questions I have, and clearly this is once you hit ICAO level 4, students would be at check ride level, I would assume.
Students should be ICAO level 4 before they're even starting their flight training.
Okay. Now, here's the issue. Who is monitoring the flight schools that are training those individuals? Because I can tell you right now, we have instructors that are letting their students on the radio that are, I could guarantee you, much lower than ICAO level 4, probably ICAO level 2.
Sure.
And it disrupts traffic operations. It aggravates their traffic controllers. And part of that responsibility is obviously on us, on the flight instructors. But if you're saying they should be at ICAO level 4 even before training, who is the one that is making sure that happens?
Right.
And who would we contact to regulate something like that?
Yeah.
Because I know of at least 2 flight schools in my immediate area that are not following that protocol.
Right. It goes to the FAA is the end of the line there. You will see here. Let me scroll down. Okay, consequences.
I'm sorry if I was skipping ahead of your.
No, that's fine. If someone does not meet the ICAO proficiency requirement across the board, they lose their certificates. They lose their ability to train. The student loses their license. The flight instructor's in danger. The examiners under the chopping block, and the medical examiners under the chopping block. So, when it's determined that ICAO proficiency is not such that, then it needs to be dealt with by the school. On site at Aviator College, if we have a student whose English maybe is ICAO level 4 when they go out for their training and they start to regress a little bit, as they might, in the moment they have an issue, they're back doing something with me, at least online, either getting their pronunciation up to par, because that's usually what it is. It's usually not comprehension or anything like that, but it's usually getting their pronunciation back up to par, because they can sometimes start to get lazy again. So, you know, but I mean, their heads are on the chopping block, because if it creates, as you say, delay in the air, unsafe situations. You also all brought into the factor of untowered airports, uncontrolled airports, and everything that happens there. So, you know, who's monitoring it?
And it's a shame because you guys are clearly taking the responsible way of doing things. And I wish there were more people doing that. But up here in the Chicago area, I don't think it's as monitored as closely as Florida and Arizona and California, where you have these very high concentrated flight training areas. Yeah, it's just a problem. It is a big problem up here.
Yeah.
And well, let me go ahead, Michelle. Then I want to ask a question. Go ahead, please.
Sure. No, I was just going to say, feel free to pass along my information. You know, I think sometimes flight schools think it's going to be problematic. I think they might fear that they're going to lose students. You know, if they're flying and doing okay, even though the radios are taking longer, it doesn't need to be a long fix. It doesn't need to be a fix where they have to go home. It could be, okay, you know, let's do something in tandem with the flight training so that we can focus on what we're doing and get these students where they need to be.
Well, and that leads me up to actually, that's a good segue to my question, because the company I work for in my day job is very, very strong on diversity. And what I'm leading up to is that if I walked up to someone in my company, non-native English, and didn't say it in a very careful way that you need to improve your English, I could be in a world of trouble. So with that, these days, you know, I have a student comes to me, and there's a flight instructor generally develops a rapport very quickly with the student, obviously. But is there a good way to approach somebody? I can't look at somebody and say, wow, I can't understand a word you're saying, or worse. How would you recommend, especially if somebody is sensitive to it or feels that, you know, they've taken 6 years of college level English back in their native country or something like that?
Sure.
How do you approach that?
Yeah, I've worked with students that have, one student literally, he was ICAO 2, and he had spent 20 years in his country studying English, and then here comes psycho English teacher and is going to tell him that his English isn't enough. And it's talking about walking on eggshells. You know, it's a difficult situation, you know, going, okay, here are some tools. I'd like to support you with your training. Let me do something so that you can reduce the amount of overflight. Let's do some things where you can communicate a little bit better on the radio. You know, I know that it's important to you to be a good pilot, and I know your safety is important to you and your family. So let's take a look at some things that we can do to support you. You know, it's not looking at you going, you know, nobody wants to be told they do something wrong, but if you're like, I know you're a dedicated person, you believe in what you're doing, you have a real passion for flying is so important to you, let me do some things that are going to make you a better pilot. Certainly, you know, and I mean, I do these little things where you know, you can't see me, but if I take my head and I prop my nose up in the air, you know, like I'm going to be a little bit snobbish, and I go, okay, let's move to ICAO level 5, you know?
Okay.
So you do these things going, right, you don't want to sit in that first officer's seat. You don't want to sit over there. Come on. You know, you're pumping them up, building them up. And if you approach things from there, even if they're ICAO level 2 and you tell them they're trying to get to 5, they'll feel a little better, you know, like you're not going, oh, you're ICAO level 2. You're like, let's move to ICAO level 5. And you know, the truth of the matter is they might not get to 5, but if they, you know, you have a rapport with them, you're building them up by saying, here, let me do something that's going to make you more employable. Let's do something so that you can make more money. Let's do something so that you get out of here faster, you know, that type of thing. Okay. Is it $500 for a Clear to Communicate class, or is it $30,000 in your flight training? Which do you want to spend?
Good point.
You know?
And then that brings to mind 2 more questions, and these may seem odd, but first of all, have you ever encountered anybody who is, at first blush, ICAO 4, ICAO 5? Certainly they were very conversant in English. They were speaking it almost as if they were almost American idiom. I'll go that far. Or the greatest thing of all, they're speaking British to us, as my German relatives like to do. But all of a sudden, when you get to the technical aspects, it goes to ICAO 1. Have you ever run into that? Where the technical language is stymieing them?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I had a student 1 month, and I met with him before he was going to start his flight training, as I met with all of the students. And I said, you know, hey, how are you? Tell me about why you want to be a pilot, those type of things, to understand what he was doing. And then I'm like, great. He said, oh, I spent 2 years in Alaska. I'm okay, fantastic. You know, we just have this fantastic dialogue, and he goes to take his ICAO test because I thought for sure he was going to make it. And he gets ICAO level 3. Okay. And I went, oh, huh. And I didn't understand what was happening, and he's like, no, this can't be. I spent 2 years in Alaska. My grammar's good. You spoke with me. I want to take that test again now. And I'm like, doesn't really work that way. if you got a 3, you're not going to take that test again and tomorrow and magically get a 4, you know, because he was sort of 3 across the board. It wasn't like one thing was. So I'm like, but he was insistent. So we let him take the test again, and this time he gets a 2. And we went, And when he started my class, we had to do one of those picture descriptions. And he said, you know, if you think of the picture that I had shown you all, you know, okay, there's a plane on the apron.
That was it?
And pretty much. And I went, okay, can you give me some more detail? And I noticed that he really struggled to pull the information out. So what comes across sometimes in the ICAO test is the ability to think.
Okay.
You know, and that is demonstrated in fluency and interactions. You know, a lot of cultures have the concept where they need to memorize information, but if they need to apply it,
Okay, so they're at the rote level. Okay, and then the other is, have you ever run into somebody from an English-speaking country where there's clearly a problem? And the reason I bring it up is I watched a video. I won't name the airline, but it was a foreign country, English, and I could barely understand the pilot, even though he was a native English speaker.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's not tested on ICAO, unfortunately. You know, but I have run into that situation with a student that I was referred to from a country where all of the education is done in English. But again, what it ran into was vocabulary. The student did not know the directions as the compass rose.
Okay.
And we run into fluency in interactions where the students can't think the way that they need to be able to do that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So,
well,
shall I give them some strategies?
Please do. Please do. That'd be a great way to wrap up, I think.
Fantastic. So some of the things that you want to think about when you're working with these international students and working with the strategies is, yes, you want to use patterns, but also make sure that you ask questions so that they don't become complacent. And try to use things like reality. I know the ultimate reality is that you're flying in the aircraft, so that in and of itself is perfect. But when you're on the ground doing ground lessons with them, see, some other things that you can do. Be aware of your own enunciation so that the students can learn, the right way to say things. And don't be afraid if you use idiomatic expressions or slang. Just try to explain them to the students what they are. And recognize that most of the time, people who are second language learners, if they say something to you and you don't understand what they say, they are immediately going to try to rephrase it. So, you don't recognize that they do that and say, well, just say again. Maybe I didn't hear what you say. So use repetition whenever you can. I had a great flight instructor who was in the plane with me, and when he was giving me the flying lesson, he literally told me everything that he was doing. And so then when I needed to do things, I was supposed to verbalize what I'm doing. And it really eliminates the, I don't know what the other student is, what my flight student is doing while he's making these decisions. Did he hear what I say? Did he not hear what I say? Try to use body language whenever you can in pictures. And when you're able to, change the order of instruction. If you can do things a little bit differently one day, do that. As I alluded to before, when you're doing questions, ask questions with question words, not just yes, no, who, what, when, where, how, why, so that the students are giving you a longer example. And as I said before, if you're asking a yes-no question, try to ask a question where the answer is going to be no, because that's immediately where you're going to pick up on things, or to do something where there's a either or. And you can also have the students tell you what should be next. What am I supposed to do now? What will I do now? What should you be doing now? And have the students rephrase what you say. So you tell them to do, have them read it back to you. And if you ever have any doubt about what the students are doing, go ahead and you can email me. You can send me an email. You can contact me on Skype. We've got a YouTube channel, a Facebook page. And so there's lots of different ways that you can communicate with us. So hopefully those ideas will give you some things, that you can work with. And if you think you have students in your flight school that you're unsure about, students can talk to me on Skype for free, and I'll give them an idea of maybe some suggestions that they can help. They don't always need a class. So I'm really in the business of helping people. That's, at the end of the day, that's the goal.
Wow, that's very generous of you.
And so we do have a survey that's up on the contact page of Expedite Level 4, where I would love your feedback for all of you that are listening, just to give us some input about what this little workshop webinar did for you. And if you ever have any questions now or later, tell me.
Any thoughts? Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, this is Don Knight. I'm just guessing that many of us, or maybe even most of the people listening on the webinar here, are not directly involved with teaching people with difficult or poor English skills. With some exceptions. I've been involved with people that have lived in this country a long time, 20 years, and still have problems with English as far as being able to understand. But one of the things I guess that I'm wondering, and maybe many of the other listeners might be wondering, is exactly how are these levels of these tests done? Is it all question answer and then listen? How are they scored? And then the other thing is, one of my visions is that somehow there'd be a way for computers to do testing where you don't have to worry about stepping on somebody's toes and what you say, because the computer's got some way, language recognition and technology. It seems like it's possible to do things like this, but I'm sure it's a ways off. But so those are a couple of questions. One is, again, how are the testings done? Is it read and respond and score? And then what about future technologies like computer recognition?
Sure. You said your name is Don?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Good question. In terms of how the testing is done, the test is all listening and speaking. Some ICAO tests are done with a video as well. But again, the purpose of the ICAO testing is to make sure that the pilots, the air traffic controllers, whoever's being tested for ICAO proficiency, because it's not just the pilots, it's the controllers as well, and the people who work on the ground, anybody that's communicating on that radio frequency, and they all need to be able to speak. So the test needs to be constructed in that format. So before ICAO will say, okay, yes, we can accept this test. The test needs to be a listening and speaking test only. There is no reading, there is no writing on the test whatsoever. And it's all done in a conversational format. It's all recorded. As I mentioned, I'm an interlocutor for the test, which is, fancy way for saying I get to push the button on the CD player and push the button on the recorder to record the student's speech. In order to become a rater, usually two people rate a test, just like if you were writing an essay for a college entrance exam, a couple people would take a look at that. So they're independently scored to make sure that there's no type of bias in what they're listening to. And as for the computer instruction is out there. The BT test that I referred to, the benchmark test of aviation that's done by T, is a computer-based test. Now that doesn't give you a certificate, but that is a computer-type test that somewhat replicates the results. And there is another test online called the Versant, and that is similar to a test, but like the BT, but to be honest, the computers don't really have the technology in there to understand what somebody's saying, and a person has the ability to make another person expand their conversation so that you can know for sure if somebody understands something or not. And the computers aren't really, where they can have a conversation with you just yet. So it's my role as an interlocutor to draw the language out of you where I feel it might be lacking. And to strengthen that, and to strengthen that a bit.
Yeah, so I understand it. It's listening and then speaking, and it would be the same thing with the computer. The computer would be you'd be listening to the computer and you'd be speaking back to the computer. But what I see as the challenge is the grading. You say that the grading is done at least by two people to make sure that you take basic general agreements, and I wonder. I guess I'm asking how these people are trained and how are they tested to be good graders. For one thing, because the computer, maybe the technology is not quite there with the computer, but voice recognition is definitely something that's come a long ways. I mean, we have Siri on the iPhone and
Sure.
et cetera, those kind of things, and the understanding is something else, but I think the technology is possibly there, and the real challenge is in the grading. So whether it's human grading or computer grading, I think it seems like it needs to be refined a little bit. Although that's just my inclination from what I'm hearing.
Yeah. The computer, it's just right now, yes, the computer can recognize the voice and understand all of that, but it's the person who can listen to what they say, interpret what they're saying, and draw some more out of them. So just like if you give a radio, message, for example, we had a air traffic controller give a message, and I use it in my classes, and it's talking. He mentions the wind direction, and then he gives a runway. And so he asks if that particular runway assignment is going to be okay for the student. And I say to the student, okay, why did he ask if that runway was going to be okay? He needs to take off. What difference does it make? This runway, that runway, whatever. And the student says, no, it's a crosswind. I'm like, aha! So, some of the interpretations of language, that if I hear that radio call, I can think of a question that's going to elicit more speech out of the student and try to get if they're really understanding in a broad sense, not just understanding the words, but conceptualizing and then putting them into a picture.
Which is the level we want all our students at, is the correlative, I can speak English, correlative level of understanding.
Exactly.
So, any other questions for Michelle? Michelle, we met down at Sun and Fun, and I forget which part of the country you're from. I apologize.
I am down in South Florida.
You're in South Florida. That's why you were.
I am in Port St. Lucie.
So I've been there on the way to the Bahamas. So the question of the day is: are you going to come up to the frigid north and join us at Oshkosh this year?
I am not, unfortunately, not going to be able to join you at Oshkosh. We're in the process of doing accreditation of my program, so that we can be able to offer a visa for flight training, so that students can not only take the classes virtually, but that the students can take the classes on site, so they'll have multiple options. So we are just wrapping up the accreditation process and looking forward to accreditation in December.
Well, I was hoping you'd be there, so we'd invite you to the breakfast and have some of our members meet you.
I will take a rain check for next year.
You are invited for next year. So certainly getting your school accredited to do that is an almost reasonable excuse to miss coming up to Oshkosh. So on that note, I really appreciate your time, Michelle, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And it's been a lot of fun. And again, it's expeditelevel4.com is your website, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And for everybody else, next week or in a week and a half, we'll be in Oshkosh. Those of you who know me, look for the hat. And we look forward to seeing everybody. Fly safe, be safe, and enjoy flying, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye-bye.